On the day Paul Newman passed away, the entire world mourned a great talent. The global press simultaneously praised him as the most faithful man in Hollywood. His half-century-long marriage was regarded as an absolute moral standard. However, the truth always contains hidden corners. In his youthful years, Paul Newman's attractiveness made countless people desire him. Many top-tier starlets were willing to discard all boundaries to approach him. Elizabeth Taylor directly slipped her hand in to shove a piece of paper with a hotel room number deep into his jacket pocket. Sophia Loren decisively reached out her hand to place it close on his thigh. And Grace Kelly was ready to turn her back on the noisy crowd to slip away with him into a cramped storage room. Today, this secret file is officially opened. We will look back at the list of 7 famous women who proactively created interactions that crossed the line with Paul Newman. All are the rawest truths hidden for many decades. Joanne Woodward, hands clenched tight in a dark backstage corner. In the summer of 2003, Paul Newman stepped out of a Nissan race car at Lime Rock Park with his racing suit soaked in sweat. He removed the heavy helmet and the dull leather gloves, revealing a plain gold wedding ring on his ring finger, just a few days prior. A group of reporters had swarmed him in this very parking lot to question him about the secret to maintaining his enduring marriage to Joanne Woodward. The American press always worshipped him as a symbol of exemplary fidelity. However, behind that perfect shell, Paul understood that he had experienced an impulsive youth with relationships that went beyond the limits. Memory immediately took him back to New York City in 1953. At that time, the 28-year-old Paul Newman was living with his first wife, Jackie Wett, and a small child. The responsibility of fatherhood, coupled with heavy financial pressure, made him feel constantly suffocated, forcing him to frequently find excuses to leave the house at night. The opportunity came when Paul landed a role in the Broadway play Picnic. This free-spirited theater environment was where he encountered the understudy actress, Joanne Woodward. In contrast to Paul's family situation, Joanne lived a very daring lifestyle. She ignored all moral barriers, frequently lingering in the cramped wings to openly watch him perform, instead of avoiding her. Paul Newman decisively played along with her approach to establish a secret relationship right on the stage. The matter officially went beyond the limits one late evening after a tense rehearsal session, when most of the staff had left. The theater's lighting system also went out one by one, leaving the dusty costume room at the end of the hallway in silence. Joanne Woodward sat with her knees hugged on the lid of a wooden trunk, maintaining a gaze directed straight at Paul. Without any hesitation, he slipped past the bulky clothing racks to approach her face. Paul Newman crouched down on the floor, reaching out to tightly interlace his 10 fingers with Joanne's left hand. Her response with a strong squeeze of the hand directly shattered all rules. That night, Paul Newman completely shed the responsibilities of a husband to share a private space with his new lover. The next morning, he smoothed his shirt collar and left the theater to catch the subway back to continue playing the family man. Standing in the present racetrack filled with the smell of engine oil, Paul twisted the cap of a mineral water bottle and took a large gulp to quench his thirst. The image of that first affair gradually faded, giving way to the memory of another world-famous starlet who once proactively demanded closeness but was decisively rejected by him. Elizabeth Taylor, the note shoved deep into the jacket pocket. Paul Newman's image as a faithful husband did not happen naturally. It was traded for a series of decisive rejections of physical temptations laid out before him. Memory continued to pull him back to a Hollywood film set in 1958, the time when he had just married Joanne Woodward and was participating in the film project Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. His co-star was the world-famous starlet Elizabeth Taylor, who always used her radiant beauty to overpower the entire crew, even though the studio atmosphere was always stifling due to the heat from the high-voltage lights. She casually enjoyed the service of dozens of assistants around her. Paul Newman chose to maintain an absolute safe distance. He only interacted with her within the scope of the script lines and then immediately left the set the second the director called cut. However, things reached a climax one late afternoon when the final shoot ended, while Paul was tucking his costume vest under his arm to head toward the storage area. Elizabeth Taylor suddenly appeared right behind his back, taking advantage of the moment when no assistants were present. She pressed herself close to Paul and decisively slipped her hand in to shove a four-folded piece of paper deep into his jacket pocket. She stepped back half a step, revealing a hotel room number clearly written on the corner of the paper, implicitly waiting for a nod. Paul Newman immediately froze, turning to face the actress while his face maintained a stone-cold expression. Without uttering a word of refusal, he directly reached into his pocket and yanked the piece of paper out, with his eyes pinned on Elizabeth Taylor. Paul used his strength to tear the paper in half and continued to crumple them into many scraps. He opened his palm, letting the entire mass of scrap paper fall into the glass ashtray on the table. With a decisive jerk of his chin, Paul threw his coat over his shoulder and strode straight to the parking lot, leaving the starlet standing stunned in the middle of the set. The roar of an engine from a race car that just swept past pulled Paul back to reality at Lime Rock Park. He tossed the empty water bottle into the iron trash can, remembering that act of rejection that day had protected his newly blooming marriage. Yet, the challenges didn't only come from co-stars. His mind flipped open to the file of a female journalist who once used suspicious actions to create the most shocking affair rumors. Nancy Bacon, the slamming of the door on the Jeep. The hot wind blew through the pit stop area, carrying the clacking sound of a paparazzi's camera lingering outside the chain-link fence. The persistent stalking of the media immediately unlocked another memory compartment in Paul Newman's mind. It was 1968, the time when his marriage to Joanne Woodward was solidified in the newspapers. Even so, the appearance of journalist Nancy Bacon on the set of the Western Project, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, upended all order. Utilizing her press pass, Nancy Bacon moved freely between sets and frequently stood recording data right next to the acting area. The interactions between her and Paul Newman quickly slipped out of the framework of a normal interview. Eye contact lasted longer than necessary, followed by meetings hidden from the camera's view. The event officially exploded one scorching afternoon in the middle of the desert, while the entire film crew was avoiding the heat under large tarps. Nancy intentionally stood, leaning her back against the side of the prop team's Jeep, grasping the signal. Paul Newman pushed himself up from his chair, striding across the technical area while completely ignoring the crowd's attention. He pulled the door handle to sit in the driver's seat, then reached out his long arm to push open the passenger door, understanding the cue. Nancy folded her notebook, stuffed it hastily into her handbag, stepped into the car, and slammed the window door shut. Paul Newman turned the key, flooring the gas pedal and causing the Jeep to lunge forward. The strong friction of the tires created a blinding cloud of dust that completely obscured the license plate and the view of the staff standing behind. He steered sharply, launching the car onto the highway and stopping before the door of a secluded roadside motel. As soon as they entered the room, Paul turned and yanked the window curtain down, blocking all light sources from the outside. That secret relationship lasted for 18 months and was later exposed by Nancy Bacon herself in the newspapers. Despite the exploding rumors, Paul Newman resolutely maintained absolute silence. He used ignoring to extinguish all queries before continuing to don the cloak of the model husband in the present. Paul turned his back to the paparazzi, heading straight to the racing team's technical area. His memory shifted again to a decisive rejection of a female colleague who had a habit of occupying space on the set. Joan Collins, the act of occupying the sofa. The clanging of metal hammers echoed continuously from the racing team's mechanical workshop. Paul Newman strode to the side of an iron table full of repair tools. He lifted a heavy wrench off the tabletop. Pitch black oil clung to the slippery metal handle. He decisively grabbed a piece of rag to wipe it multiple times to clean the stain. This action of tidying the workspace immediately evoked an old memory. Maintaining fidelity didn't simply lie in rejecting hastily shoved notes. It also required him to use action to directly reclaim personal boundaries whenever they were brazenly invaded by others. Memory took him back to the set of the comedy project Rally Round the Flag, Boys. In 1958, Paul's marital life with Joanne Woodward was in its most passionate stage. His co-star was the starlet Joan Collins. She took on a character with a flirtatious personality on screen. This actress decided to take that very flirtatious attitude and apply it directly to real life right at the studio. She frequently sought ways to narrow the physical distance with Paul, with touches glancing over his shoulder. She continuously appeared in the spots where he sat reading the script, facing that bold approach. Paul Newman established a solid defensive wall. He always stood up and left immediately whenever Joan Collins came near. He absolutely did not create any private communication space for the two of them. The patience of both sides was officially broken one scorching noon. The filming schedule temporarily stopped. Most of the film crew members scattered to the communal dining area. Paul Newman lingered on the set to discuss further with the assistant director. His personal restroom at the end of the hallway was completely empty, utilizing the vacancy. Joan Collins casually twisted the door handle and stepped inside. She didn't knock for permission at all. The actress directly occupied his private space. She removed her red high heels from her feet. She flopped down in the middle of the only leather-upholstered sofa in the room. She crossed her legs, adjusting the folds of her silk dress to be perfectly comfortable. She implicitly set a perfect spatial trap to force Paul Newman into a direct confrontation. 15 minutes later, Paul Newman strode along the quiet hallway. He pushed open the door to enter his own restroom. His gaze immediately struck the figure of Joan Collins sitting prominently on the sofa. The atmosphere in the small room became stifling. Paul froze right at the threshold. He didn't smirk or smile in greeting. He didn't utter a request for her to leave either. His rejection was expressed through a series of decisive actions. Paul immediately took a large step backward. His right hand tightly gripped the brass door handle. He channeled all the force in his arm to yank the wooden door wide open toward the hallway. Paul stood straight, pressing his back against the wall. He jerked his chin, pointing straight toward the light-filled walkway. He used that cold silence to completely strip away the privacy she had just taken pains to arrange. The act of throwing the door open shattered the shady intent, forcing Joan Collins to automatically slip into her shoes and then trudge out. The piercing signal horn on the Lime Rock Park track cut through the reminiscence. Paul Newman threw the dirty rag hard into the iron trash can. He twisted the wrench to tighten a loose bolt on the race car's wheel axle. That act of clearing obstacles that day helped him maintain safe boundaries for himself. He stretched his shoulders and stood up straight. He half closed his eyes to receive the cool breeze blowing through the pit stop. His mind flipped open to the fifth character. It wasn't a blunt rejection. It was a secret memory carrying the silhouette of a world-famous starlet with the act of turning her back to leave the noisy crowd. Grace Kelly enclosed space in the storage room. Thunderous applause rose from the main grandstand area of Lime Rock Park. A crowd of fans jostled and pushed each other against the chain-link protective fence. They held up posters of a young Paul Newman, hoping for a commemorative signature. He lowered the wrench to the metal tabletop. He used a clean cotton towel to carefully wipe the pitch-black grease stains caught in the crevices of his fingers. Facing a noisy crowd always made him feel suffocated. The surrounding gaze of hundreds of curious eyes immediately awakened an old memory. His image as a model husband had once been involved in meetings hidden behind the bustle of the elite. Memory took him back to Los Angeles in 1954. At that time, A flurry of rumors exploded across the film capital about private meetings between Paul Newman and the world-famous starlet Grace Kelly. The event took place right before the actress left Hollywood to marry the Prince of Monaco. A large-scale dinner party was held in the main lobby of the luxury Beverly Hills Hotel. The interior space was filled with the sound of orchestral music from a live band. Grace Kelly wore a snow-white silk dress. She was swarmed by dozens of photographers combined with the most powerful producers. The flashlights from cameras blinked continuously, shining directly on her haughty face. In complete contrast to that bustle, Paul Newman chose to stand leaning his back against a marble wall in a deserted corner of the hallway. He held an unlit cigarette between his two index fingers. He maintained a sharp gaze directed straight at the actress. A moment later, Grace Kelly lifted a glass of white wine to take a small sip. She set the wine glass down on the metal tray of a passing waiter. Without uttering a word of farewell, she decisively turned her back to the noisy crowd. She took rhythmic steps on the red carpet, heading straight for the dark corner of the hallway where Paul was waiting. When the distance between them was exactly 1 foot, Paul Newman dropped the cigarette onto the wool carpet. He used the toe of his leather shoe to grind hard on it to crush the paper shell. Immediately, he extended his long right arm. Grabbing Grace Kelly's elbow, he used force to yank her body completely behind the wooden door of a nearby storage room. The metal hinges creaked. The door slammed shut. Paul Newman pressed Grace Kelly's back against the cold wall. He directly used his own tall physique to block every movement gap in the cramped room. They shared a space completely isolated from the noise outside. No one offered long explanations. Those decisive physical interactions completely replaced every line of dialogue. The next morning, Grace Kelly continued to stride on the red carpet with her usual haughty posture. Thousands of articles continued to praise her elegant demeanor. The crowd of fans never knew about that decisive turning of the back that left all that glory behind. The loudspeaker calling the racers' names echoed throughout Lime Rock Park, pulling Paul Newman back to the present. The crowd in the stands continued to scream. He tossed the dirty cotton towel into the iron trash can. He zipped his racing suit up to his neck. His gaze was directed toward the sun-filled pit lane. The rumor of the secret relationship with Grace Kelly remained forever in the historical archive pages. His mind flipped open to the record of the sixth character. This time, a decisive rejection continued to appear when a female colleague intentionally placed her hand on his thigh. Sophia Loren, a hand placed close on the trouser's fabric. Paul Newman crouched next to the front left tire of the Nissan. He ran his bare hand along the worn rubber surface. The heat radiating from the parched asphalt baked the skin of his hand. That sticky friction immediately triggered another memory zone. His image as a faithful man was built upon absolute defense. He was forced to continuously use decisive actions to brush off physical touches that intentionally crossed the safety line. Memory took him back to the film set of the project Lady L in 1965. His marriage to Joanne Woodward had spanned nearly a decade by this point. In contrast to that stability, the Italian starlet Sophia Loren brought a completely different air. She possessed a radiant beauty imbued with Mediterranean flair. She always knew how to use sexual magnetism to control everyone around her. The working atmosphere on the set was frequently disrupted by her flirtatious style. Even so, Paul Newman chose to establish an invisible partition wall. He kept the furthest distance possible. He only exchanged work within the scope of the script lines. The event that went out of control took place one morning during a joint script reading. The director arranged two wooden chairs close together in the middle of a cramped workspace. Paul Newman entered first. He sat down in the designated position. He placed a stack of white papers on his thigh, bowing his head in concentration to skim through every line of dialogue. A few minutes later, Sophia Loren entered the room. She didn't sit down immediately. She grabbed the backrest, dragging the wooden chair closer to him even further. The sound of the chair legs rubbing against the wooden floor rang out piercingly. The space between the two was squeezed tight. She sat down, intentionally leaning her upper body toward Paul. A dense smell of perfume immediately rushed into the air. She lowered her voice to read the lines. Suddenly, she extended her right arm. She directly placed her hand on his thigh. She used her fingers to lightly rub the coarse fabric of his dress pants. Paul Newman immediately stopped reading the script. He lifted his head. His eyes were pinned to the starlet's face. He didn't smile politely. He didn't utter a gentle reminder either. The rejection was expressed through ice-cold physical actions. Paul swung his left arm up. He decisively swiped Sophia Loren's hand hard off his leg. That swipe completely stripped away the wrongful physical contact. Immediately after, he braced both hands on the seat of the chair. He used force to push his entire body to stand up straight. He grabbed the backrest of the wooden chair. He lifted it entirely off the ground, moving it to another position exactly 3 steps away from her. Paul flopped down. He placed the script stack on his thigh. He continued reading his lines. He directly used physical distance to completely smash the seductive intent of his female colleague. The burnt smell of rubber pulled Paul Newman back to Lime Rock Park. He slapped his palm hard against the side of the tire. He stood up straight. The crowd of fans outside the fence continued to scream his name. They admired a perfect man. They had no idea about the series of physical barriers he had to erect to protect that marriage. Paul pulled a tissue from his back pocket. He wiped away the black dust clinging to his fingertips. He balled up the paper and tossed it straight into the iron trash can. His mind flipped open to the record of the last character on the list. This time, a decisive rejection took place right before the dressing room door with a maneuver of tapping his hand on his wedding ring. Charlotte Rampling, the act of blocking the way at the dressing room door. The roar of a V8 engine tore through the thick atmosphere at Lime Rock Park. Paul Newman reached out to slam the hood of the Nissan shut. The sound of metal clashing rang out dryly. He slipped his hand into his denim pocket. He pulled out a plaid handkerchief. He rubbed the cloth hard against his forehead to soak up the sweat beating under the summer heat. The gold wedding ring on his ring finger flashed under the sun. Paul Newman's image as a model husband was not a naturally standing fortress. It was reinforced by dozens of times he directly used this token as a weapon to knock back all flirtations. Memory took him back to the film set of the project The Verdict in 1982. At this time, Paul Newman had turned 57. His marriage to Joanne Woodward had spanned many decades. His co-star was the British actress Charlotte Rampling. She possessed a cold beauty along with an incredibly mysterious demeanor. The set atmosphere was always maintained in gloom to suit the script content. The film crew had to continuously perform recording shifts that lasted through the night. Exhaustion was clearly visible on the face of every technical staff member. Paul Newman chose to rest in his personal dressing room between scenes. The tense event took place at dawn. The final night shoot had just ended. Staff were hurriedly packing up cameras along with the electrical cable systems. Paul Newman removed the loose tie from his neck. He draped it over his shoulder. He took weary steps along the narrow hallway. He went straight toward his dressing room. Suddenly, he froze. Charlotte Rampling was standing leaning her back against the wooden door panel. She crossed her arms over her chest. She directly used her body to block the only entrance to the room. The distance between them was less than half a meter. She lifted her face. She looked straight into Paul's eyes. She spoke up, suggesting a private neck and shoulder massage right inside the room. Paul Newman immediately frowned. He didn't utter a tactful refusal. He didn't exhibit an angry attitude either. The rejection was expressed by a series of decisive physical actions. Paul raised his left hand up to the eye level of his female colleague. He spread his fingers wide. Next, he used the index finger of his right hand to tap hard down on the plain gold wedding ring on his ring finger. The clicking sound rang out for 3 distinct beats in the quiet space of the hallway. That ring-tapping action replaced a stone-cold warning. Right after the third tap, Paul Newman lowered his hand. He directly slipped past her to the side. He took long strides straight out to the parking area. He abandoned Charlotte Rampling standing rooted before the room door. The burnt smell of gasoline pulled Paul Newman back to the noisy reality at the technical pit stop. He folded the handkerchief small. He stuffed it deep into his pocket. The crowd of fans in the stands was still holding up banners printed with his image. They clapped in applause for a perfect Hollywood icon. They praised a half-century-long romance without a blemish. They would never know about the torn scraps of paper, the blunt swipes of the hand, or the decisive ring taps to maintain that image. Paul Newman reached out to pick up his helmet. He put it on his head. He fastened the safety strap under his chin. He strode toward the cramped cockpit of the race car. He pulled the door handle, decisively sat in the driver's seat. He swung his arm to slam the car door shut. The memory of the women officially sank into the past, giving way to the fierce race waiting ahead. Which starlet's approach surprised you the most? Leave a comment right below the video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Tap the bell icon next to it. The next shocking secret files will be continuously opened.